Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Rabbi zidni ilma. In the name of Allah, my Lord, open up for me my chest and ease my task for me. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. Now, brothers and sisters, I decided to revisit the topic of Salat. And I also wanted to make an introduction to Zakat as well, because I find that there are so many verses in the Qur'an that make mention of both Salat and Zakat together. There's at least 20 or so verses that mention this. Now the question is, are we to understand them as two separate or independent concepts, or do we understand them as being complementary and completing or even explaining one another? Okay, God willing, we'll get started. Now, Salat. Now, in my last video, I concluded that the word Salat itself is an umbrella term and not merely just one specific thing, okay? Now, I also explained that how Salat was used in conjunction with so many other things throughout the Qur'an, okay? And there's a whole, and I showed you a whole list of do's and don'ts within the Qur'an. And also, I showed that Salat must be understood according to its context, brothers and sisters. Okay, now here's just very quick, I'm just going to quickly go through the list of do's within the Qur'an. Now, as you know, in that presentation, I mentioned those who believe in the unseen and do Salat and spend of what was provided, those who do Salat and Zakat as well, those who bow with those who bow, those seeking help through patience and Salat. And there's a whole other list as well. I don't want to go through all of these, brothers and sisters. If you're interested, you could refer to that video, God willing. Holding fast to the book, doing it at the two ends of the day for Allah's remembrance, enjoying upon the family, being humbly intent, preventing immorality and wrongdoing, enjoying what is good and forbidding what is wrong. And there's a whole list of don'ts as well, okay? Now, don't do it while intoxicated, don't do it with laziness, don't do it to show off, etc., etc. Okay? Okay, there are just some examples there. Now, let's revisit the word Salat. Now, we're told that the word Salat comes from the root Sad, Lam, Wa, which typically has the following meanings: prayer, supplication, petition, oration, eulogy, benediction, commendation, blessing, honor, magnify, bring forth, follow closely, walk or walk behind closely, to remain attached, to contact or be in contact. Now, the words which really stood out to me, brothers and sisters, I've underlined them here. Following closely, attached, and contact. Okay? But what's interesting, brothers and sisters, is there are some who make the claim that the word Salat doesn't come from Sad Lam Wa, but instead comes from Waw Sad Lam. Now, this is very interesting. Now look at the striking similarities between the two roots. Have a look at this. The word Waw Sad Lam comes, it could mean attain, reach, connect. Look at that word there, connect. I've underlined it there. Connect is similar to attach or contact, isn't it? Very similar. You also see the word make close. Now that's similar to following closely, for example. You also have to come, deliver, convey, to continue, union. See these words, these key words here? I've concluded that the word Salat is actually an abstract noun versus something concrete, okay? Now, it includes things such as connection. If you put the two root words together, it comes up with a definition of connection, attachment, contact, make close, following closely, union, etc. Now, I'm going to present some examples where we see the word Salat and its derived forms are used, such as salawat, yusallu, yusalli, sallu, salla, etc. Okay, I'm going to give some examples. Now, the first verse I want to quote is chapter 6, verse 162. Say, the messengers told us, say, indeed, my salat, salati. Now, if we translate this to mean my connection, my contact, my attachment, my closeness, and my rites of sacrifice, my living and my dying for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Doesn't that make sense? Here's another example. Chapter 11, verse 87. They say, O Shu'aib, alayhi salam, does your prayer, it says prayer here, as-salatuka, your salat, command that we leave what our fathers worship or not do with what we please? Now think about this. Now, the word salat, your salat means your connection, your contact, your attachment, your union, your closeness with Allah. Think about that, brothers and sisters. Here's another example, chapter 24, verse 41. Do you not see that Allah is exalted by whomsoever is within the heavens and the earth, and the birds with their wings spread? Each of them know its means of salatahu. Think about it. Each one of them know its means of connection, contact, attachment, bond. Do you see what I mean, brothers and sisters? See, this word salah, when it's used on its own, it's an abstract noun, okay? Now, finally, chapter 75, verse 31 to 32. And he had not believed. It says saddaqa, but really saddaqa sort of means telling the truth. Nor did he salla, it says prayed here, but rather, walakin kadhaba wa tawalla. Now, instead of doing saddaqa and salla, this person then kadhaba, which means denied or lied, and he turned away. Now, think about it. These are the opposites, aren't they? The opposite of kadhaba will be saddaqa, to tell the truth, right? And you see the word turned away. What would be the opposite of turning away? That would be turning towards, wouldn't it? It's to embrace. It would be to connect. It would be to make contact. It would be to be close and be attached, etc. Okay? Now, this is probably the most abused verse out of the entire Qur'an. SubhanAllah. I just want to quickly go through this again. Chapter 33, verse 56. Indeed, Allah, it says, confers blessings, but it doesn't say that in the text. Allah and His angels do something called yusalluna, which is a derived form of that word salat. Ala and Nabi. O you who believe, ask Allah to confer blessings. It says blessings here, and grant Him peace. Now, the word here is yusalluna. It says that Allah and His angels are doing something called yusalluna on the Prophet. And Allah is commanding us to do exactly the same thing. Now, it doesn't say send blessings or confer blessings here, brothers and sisters. You can see from the root word definition of sad lam waw or waw sad lam, you can see that this yusalluna means contact, making close, attachment. So Allah and His angels are close to the Prophet. They are connected to him. They make contact with him. And Allah has commanded us to do the same. Because if you look at the context, I'm not going to read it because of time, brothers and sisters. The context, it's talking about the believers visiting the Prophet's house for a meal from him. And Allah Azza wa Jalla gives us a set of instructions saying, you know, you should not stick around for too long. When you ask something of his wives, ask it from behind a veil. And do not stick around too long for conversation, because this would trouble the Prophet, etc. Now, it's within this context, it says Allah and His angels do yusalluna on the Prophet. So in other words, Allah is telling us to make contact with the Prophet, okay? Make contact with him, be connected to him, be attached to him, make a union with him, okay? Meaning, from the context, this means, you know, protect the honor of the Prophet. Think about it, brothers and sisters. What else can this possibly mean? The verse continues, it says, indeed, those that abuse Allah and His Messenger, Allah has cursed them in this world and in the hereafter, prepared for them a humiliating punishment. Think about that, brothers and sisters. Now, from the context, it says that Allah and His angels are connected to the Prophet, and they're helping, they're protecting, and they're honoring him. Okay? Because this is also evident with, in the same chapter, verse 43, it says the same thing about the believers. هُوَ الَّذِي يُصَلِّي عَلَيْكُمْ وَمَلَائِكَتُهُ. Say the word yusalli and the word yusallu. It's the same word, brothers and sisters. It's saying that Allah and His angels are doing the same thing onto the believers. Allah and His angels are connected to you. They are close to you. They are in contact with you. They're helping and supporting you, brothers and sisters. Now, in chapter 9, verse 99, have a look at this verse. But among the Bedouins are some who believe in Allah and the last day, and they consider what they spend as a means of nearness to Allah and of obtaining, it says, invocations here, and obtaining salawat of the Messenger. Was salawatir rasuli. Think about this, brothers and sisters. What does the salawat of the Messenger mean? Did he sit there all day with beads in his hand counting Allahumma salli ala on this person, Allahumma salli ala on that person? Is that what the Messenger did, brothers and sisters? Or did it mean the Messenger was connected to them? He was close to them. He was helping them. He was honoring them. He was protecting them. Moving on. in the same chapter, verse 9 and verse 103, look what it reads. Take, O Muhammad, from their wealth a charity by which you purify them and cause them increase. Now, I'm going to get back to this verse regarding zakat later, okay? And it says, invoke Allah's blessings. It doesn't say Allah's blessings. It says, invoke upon them. وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. Remember the verse earlier? Allah commands us, وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِ. Now, he says, وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. The Prophet himself was commanded to do salli. Salli, sallu is the same word, brothers and sisters. Now, how did the Prophet do salli onto the believers? Did he sit there all day and say, sallu ala Bilal, sallu ala Abu Bakr, sallu ala Umar? Did he do that, brothers and sisters? Or does this mean he connected with them? He was close to them. He honored them. He encouraged them. He pushed them to be better. Brothers and sisters, think about that. Now, the word salat, now when it's used, when it's coupled with the term aqimu, this is fascinating. Chapter 2, verse 3. Those who believe in the unseen, yu'minun bil ghaybi wa yuqimuna as-salata, and those who establish the salat and spend of what we have provided for them. Okay? Now that word there, now the word salat, especially salat used with the definite article, as-salat, aqimu salat. Okay, this is important. This now becomes something more concrete. Now the reason for this is because the word aqimu, and I touched upon this on one of my other videos, it comes from the root qaf, waw, mim, and it means the following. Stand still or firm, rose or stand up, managed, conducted, ordered, regulated, superintended, established, made it straight or right, maintain, erect, observe, perform, set up, people, community, company, abode, stature, dignity, rank, and the word aqama, which means to keep a thing or an affair in a right state. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to present some examples now. Now, chapter 10, verse 105, and commanded, the believers are commanded, direct your face, yourself towards the religion. The word aqim, which comes from that same word aqimu, is used there. Aqim wajhaka lidini hanifan. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that word aqim is used there, which means to set straight or right, to establish, to maintain, okay? So maintain yourselves within the deen of hanifan. This is not talking about some literal direction, brothers and sisters. Now, this verse is very similar to the one above. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ قَيِّمِ. So direct yourselves towards the correct religion. Now, these two verses, you could say these are more of the way the word aqim is used, aqimu, it's more of an abstract thing, isn't it? However, look at this verse here, brothers and sisters. This is fascinating. Chapter 18, verse 77. Now, this mentions the story of Musa alayhi salam and that individual which Moses was sent to learn wisdom from. Now, this individual traditionally is known as Al-Khidr, right? But in the Quran, it doesn't make mention of Al-Khidr. But what it says is, so chapter 18, verse 77, so they set out until they came to the people of a town. They asked its people for food, but they refused to offer them hospitality. And they found therein a wall which was about to collapse. Look at this. So he, Al-Khidr, restored it. فَأَقَامَهُ. فَأَقَامَ comes from that same aqima word. Think about it. Moses said to him, if you wish, you could have taken a payment for it. Now, the word aqimu, it can also mean to restore something, to bring something into its original position or its original state. Think about that, brothers and sisters. Now, finally, chapter 30, verse 12, and on the day when the hour will be established, taqumu, the same root, the mujrimin, the wrongdoers, will be plunged into destruction with despair. Okay? Now, according to the context, it could sort of have an abstract meaning or it could have a more concrete meaning. It depends on the context, brothers and sisters. But I believe when the word aqimu is used together with salat, this is a concrete thing. Allah is commanding us or instructing us to do something. Okay? Now, moving on. Now, have a look at these two verses here. These two verses, for me, sort of explain what Aqimus Salah is all about. Okay? Now, it says here, what Aqimis Salah, the word Aqimi. Now, Aqimi is, in Arabic, it's singular. Okay? Versus Aqimu, which is plural. But if you look at the context of these two verses, I urge you to please do this, brothers and sisters, you can see that this is addressing Prophet Muhammad himself. Subhanallah, okay? And it's telling the Prophet to do aqim as-salah at the two ends of the day and in the parts of the night. Indeed, the good deeds do away with the misdeeds. That is a reminder for those who remember. And in this verse, something very similar to the first one, aqim as-salata at the declining of the sun until the darkness of the night. And this is the dead giveaway here, brothers and sisters. Wal Qur'an al-Fajr. The word Qur'an itself means recitation. It's saying now the recitation at dawn is ever witnessed. So this is telling me, these two verses, that the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, he held sessions, or you could say these congregational sessions, where he met with the believers to recite and deliver the Qur'an to them. Okay? Now, he did this at the two ends of the day and in parts of the night. And he also did it at the declining of the sun until the darkness of the night. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm not going to go into the debate about is this done 3 times a day or is this done 5 times a day. I'm not going to get into that debate. But this, to me, means that, like, think about this, brothers and sisters. Now, did the Prophet Muhammad, did he just randomly recite verses in the marketplace or on the street and say, have a nice day? No. He obviously, anyone who believed in and followed him, he would have held these classes or these sessions. He would have had these congregations where he was continuously reciting the verses to the people. And this is what these two verses are all about. Now here's the thing, brothers and sisters. Now, I know many of you are probably going to ask me the question, now, brother, okay, so how do you do your salat? Now, brothers and sisters, this is my answer to this question. I like to keep things simple, brothers and sisters. I say don't overly complicate things. What I usually say, or what I do, what I recommend, is that stick to what you already know regarding salah. Now, we've been taught, unfortunately, we've been taught this traditional salah, okay? Where we do this sort of systemized step by step. You know, you got to stand like this, you got to bow like this, you got to say this, you got to say that. Now, what I say is that you should re-evaluate, okay, and reconstruct your salah to make it match the verses of the Qur'an. And I mentioned this in my last salah video as well, okay? Now, I still do what is known as a traditional salah, but what I've done is I've reconstructed it, brothers and sisters. Now, I'll give you some examples. For example, I no longer recite something called tashahhud in my salah, because first of all, this is not from the Qur'an. It's got nothing to do with the Qur'an, brothers and sisters, okay? So what I did, I scrapped this because I researched about it. Did you know there's like 3-4 different versions of tashahhud? Sunnis have their own version of tashahhud. Shia have their own version of tashahhud. So what does that mean? These are doubtful matters, brothers and sisters. Also, this thing about Durood Sharif, which apparently we're supposed to send blessings and greet the Prophet in our salah. Also, I've scrapped this. This has got nothing to do with the Qur'an. Nor do I, in my salah, nor do I sort of fiddle with my finger, bend your right foot, these things. I don't do any of this, brothers and sisters. I even avoid the so-called taslim, giving the salams at the end of your salah. Now, I did some homework about this. Now, what they tell us is the Hanafi madhab, they say that if you give one salam to your right, that's sufficient to conclude the prayer. They say you don't have to give the left one. But other madhabs say, no, you have to do both. You have the Maliki madhab, they have an opinion where they say there's 3 salams. There's one salam you give to your right. There's a second salam, get this, apparently you have to give a silent greeting or salam to the imam. What kind of nonsense is this? And then the third salam you give to your right. And there's all this thing about when you give salams, are you giving it to the people to your right or to your left? Or are you giving it to angels to your left or right? There's all this confusion. Brothers and sisters, these are doubtful matters. I've scrapped all of this, subhanAllah. Now, the way I see it, brothers and sisters, is Aqimul Salah for the Prophet was him simply reciting, conveying, teaching, delivering the verses of Allah. That's what it was, brothers and sisters. But what happened was, over time, the companions saw this from the Prophet. They saw him. Now, think about this. How do you think he did this, brothers and sisters? Now, he would have delivered the Qur'an, what? Standing, right? He would have done it standing. At times, he may have lowered his head. Allahu Alam. At times, he may have sat down. At times, out of fear and admiration of the verses, especially those verses talking about the punishment and the Jahannam. The Prophet may have prostrated. Allahu Alam. He may have done this, brothers and sisters. Now, the companions saw this from him, And they did their best to mimic this practice. But over time, unfortunately, Salah became more of a ritual. Salah became something called namaz. Now, this is well known in my culture. They use that word namaz, subhanAllah. But the word namaz is nowhere to be found in the Quran, brothers and sisters. So this was the Prophet. He was delivering and teaching and conveying the Quran at those specific times of the day. Okay? That's what aqimu means. Aqimu means establish, to restore, to maintain. And the way you see it, and since the word aqimu could also mean restore. So what we should do as believers is we should do our best by re-evaluating and reconstructing our salah to restore salah to its original position according to the verses of Allah. Brothers and sisters, I hope that makes sense. Okay? Moving on. Now, here are some examples very quickly which mention what salah is, as-salat. Okay? And Allah tells us here in chapter 4, verse 43, O you who believe, do not approach salah while you are intoxicated. La taqrabuna salata wa antum sukara. Right? Until you know what you are saying. Okay? So this is reciting the Quran. Aqimu salah is pretty much revolved around the Quran, brothers and sisters. It's about reciting, it's about teaching, it's about delivering, it's about conveying, it's about holding fast to the book, and it's about following the verses of Allah. SubhanAllah. Now, here's another verse. This is quite a lengthy verse. I'm not going to go through all of it because of time. Chapter 4, verse 101 to 103. Now, Allah Azza wa Jalla is describing how the Prophet would lead the believer in as-salat, him reciting. Now, remember, brothers and sisters, the Prophet was commanded to do aqimu, right? To recite and deliver the Quran continuously, consistently, persistently, even in a time of warfare. There's no exemptions, brothers and sisters. But the only concession here is that Allah is telling them because of your difficult situation of a time of conflict and war, Allah is saying you can shorten the salah. Okay? This is the Prophet simply relaying or conveying, teaching and reciting the verses to the believers. Okay? And towards the end here, it says, as-salat has been decreed upon the believers at specific times. Kitaban mawquta. The word kitab could mean a book, but it could also mean something decreed or something ordained. Okay? Now moving on. Here's another verse, chapter 4, verse 142. Indeed, the hypocrites look to deceive Allah, but it is He who is deceiving them. And when they stand, look at that word there, qamu. It's come through that same aqimu word, qamu ila salata. When they stand or they go to establish the salah, they qamu. So that same word there. They do it lazily, or they do it to show off to the people, or they do it by remembering Allah little. Now, this is Allah is instructing us, do not do this. Remember in that last video I made about salah, there's a whole list of do's and don'ts within the salah. SubhanAllah, Allah's reminding us of that. Now, chapter 5, verse 6. Now, O you who believe, when you rise, qumtum. So it comes to that same aqimu word, okay? From its derived form. Qumtum ila salati. Wash your faces and your forearms to the elbows, wipe over your head, and wash your feet to the ankles. Now, Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving us some instructions. So before you do aqimu salah, do these. Now, I know there are some brothers and sisters, they say, oh, this is not a literal washing of the face and things like this. Brothers and sisters, it's up to you how you take this. But me, I have a more literal approach, so this is how I take it, okay? Now, chapter 7, verse 170, but those who hold fast to the book, you must sikuna bil kitab, hold fast to the book, and wa aqimu salata. Now, brothers and sisters, the use of the Arabic term wow doesn't always separate or make distinction between two or more things. But rather, the Arabic wow, the conjunction and, it simply adds further detail or further information to clarify the point. In other words, establish your salah, your closest with Allah, right? Your closest, your contact, your attachment to Allah through the verses of Allah by holding fast to it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Here's another verse, chapter 29, verse 45. Recite, O Muhammad, what has been revealed to you of the book, and establish wa aqimis salata. Indeed, as-salata prohibits immorality and wrongdoing, and the remembrance of Allah is greater, and Allah knows that which you do. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all these instructions to recite, to convey. Okay? Here's another verse, chapter 35, verse 29. Indeed, those who recite the book of Allah, yatluna kitab Allah, and establish salah. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ Spend of what we have provided them, secretly and publicly. Expect a transaction profit that will never perish. Okay? Allah is telling us to aqimu salat together with spending from your wealth as well. Okay? Now, look at these two verses here. How do I conclude that aqimu salat is about reciting and delivering the Qur'an? Ask yourself this, brothers and sisters. What was the sole mission or the main objective of the Messenger Muhammad alayhi salam? Wasn't it to recite and deliver the Qur'an? Look at this verse here, chapter 2, verse 129. O Lord, send among them a messenger from themselves who will recite yatluna alayhim upon them your verses, ayatika, and teach them the scripture, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, and wisdom, and purify them. Indeed, you are exalted in might and wise. I'm going to come back to this beautiful verse later. Okay. Now look at this verse, chapter 5, verse 67. Ya ayyuha rasul balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbika. O messenger, convey that that has been sent down to you from your Lord. So if the messenger recited and he delivered and he conveyed the verses of Allah, and doesn't the Quran also say وَمَا عَلَى الرُّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينَ? Not upon the messengers except to deliver the message. What message? This message, the Quran. And doesn't the Quran also say, I don't want to lose my train of thought here, doesn't it say that in the messenger of Allah is uswatun hasanatun, is an excellent pattern for those who believe in Allah and the last day? So if the messenger Muhammad was commanded to do aqim as-salah at the two ends of the day and in the parts of the night, shouldn't we be doing the same thing, brothers and sisters? Okay, think about it. Now, just recapping again, the word aqimu or aqimi means to rise, stand up, establish, make straight or right, maintain, erect, perform, set up, and restore. So what we should be doing, brothers and sisters, is we should be looking to restoring salah to its original. We should scrap all these innovative practices, brothers and sisters. You could tell from over the centuries they've innovated with practices of tashahhud and durud sharif and taslim and moving the index finger. These are all innovative and doubtful matters, brothers and sisters. We should scrap all that and look to restore salah to its original position. Because think about it. Didn't all the messengers before Muhammad, didn't they also do salat? And didn't they also do zakah? Think about it. How did Ibrahim do salat? Did he recite tashahhud? And did he send blessings to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam? What about Jesus and John the Baptist? How did they do salah? So aqimu salah was all about reciting and conveying and holding fast to and teaching the book of Allah. That's what aqimu salah is all about, brothers and sisters. Okay, moving on. Now the word salah, remember, is an abstract noun which means connect, attach, contact, make close, following closely, union. Okay, but when the two are coupled together, aqimu or aqim is connected to salah. It's a concrete thing, which meaning reciting, delivering, conveying, teaching, holding fast to, following the verses of Allah, brothers and sisters. I hope that makes sense. Now, brothers and sisters, zakat. We'll get to zakat now. I actually didn't really have any intention of talking about zakat. I just wanted to sort of revisit salah itself. But there are so many verses, brothers and sisters, that talk about salah and zakat together. And I thought, look, there's some sort of significance. Are they two separate concepts, or do they complement and sort of explain and complete one another? Think about it. Now let's look at zakat and its root form and its root word. It comes from zay, kaf, waw, and it means the following. It increased, augmented, it throve, grew well, flourished, prospered, and produced fruit. It was and became pure, purification, goodness, righteousness, lead or enjoy a plentiful, easy, soft, or delicate life. Put a thing into a good or a right state. Alms, poor rate, due. Now, they tell us that traditionally, they tell us that zakat is a tax which we need to give annually. We're obliged to do so. But brothers and sisters, is this really what the Quran says about zakat? Let's have a look at the verses. Now, you could go to that link there, which shows you all the different derived forms of the word zakat. Now, the word zakat, similar to salat, is an abstract noun, okay? Which means increased, growth, purified, thrived, prospered, flourished, goodness, righteousness. Now, later in the presentation, when I start talking about Salat and Zakat being used together, I'm going to give the example of the expression, reap the fruits of what you, I don't want to lose my train of thought. Reap the fruits of your labor. Reap the fruits of your labor. Okay, I'm going to use that as an example. Let's move on, inshallah. Now, chapter 2, verse 174. Look what it says. Verily, those who consider what Allah has sent down of the book and purchase a small gain therefrom, they eat into their bellies nothing but fire. Allah will not speak to them on the day of resurrection, nor will He purify them. Now, the word there is wala yuzakkihim. It comes from that same zakat root. Kaf, waw, mim. Allah will not purify them, right? Here's another verse, chapter 4, verse 49. Have you seen those who claim themselves to be pure? Yuzakkuna. Now, these people that claim that they're pure, that they have zakat, right? Rather, Allah purifies whom He wills. Balillahu, nay, but rather, yuzakki man yasha. That word yuzakki comes from that same zakat word. Allah purifies, brothers and sisters. Does this mean Allah gives us some sort of a tax? Think about it. Here's another verse, chapter 9, verse 103. Take, O Muhammad, from their wealth a charity, sadaqatan. Now, sadaqah is a charity, right? Which we give from our wealth. Which you purify them and cause them increase. وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ comes from that same zakat word. Now, giving from your wealth, brothers and sisters, is a means of attaining or receiving purification. In other words, zakat. Think about that, okay? Now, moving to the next verse, chapter 24, verse 21. Have a look at this one. O you who believe, follow not the footsteps of shaitan, and whoever follows the footsteps of shaitan, verily he commands al-fakhsha wal-munkar. And had it not been for the grace of Allah and His mercy upon you, not one of you would have ever become pure from sins. Look at that, brothers and sisters. Okay? But Allah purified. Now it says guides to Islam here. It doesn't say that in the text, brothers and sisters. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah purifies whom He wills, brothers and sisters. This yuzakki comes from that zakat word. It has the same definition. Think about it. Here are some more verses. Chapter 8, verse 7. Now this is in the Surah Abasa, where Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and turned away, right? And it says, and not upon you, ma alayka, second person masculine singular pronoun. It's addressing the Prophet directly here. Ma alayka, not upon you, if he will not be purified. Look at that. Yazakka, the Prophet himself couldn't purify anyone, but Allah purifies whom He wills, brothers and sisters. Just like how it's Allah who guides. Doesn't the Qur'an say, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ? And doesn't the Qur'an also say, يُتْكِنْ حِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ? Allah grants wisdom to whom He wills. All this comes from Allah and Allah alone, brothers and sisters. It's not the Prophet who does this. Okay? Now, moving on, here's another verse. Chapter 19, verse 12 to 13. Now, look at this verse, brothers and sisters. This really caught my attention. Allah is addressing Yahya alayhi salam, saying to him, O Yahya, O John, take the scripture with determination. And we gave him, now the word is wa'ataynahu. I'm going to get to the root of that in a moment. Wa'ataynahu, judgment, while still a boy, and affection from us, and zakatan, and zakatan from us. Now, look, think about that, brothers and sisters. Allah gave Yahya alayhi salam zakat. Now, does that mean He gave him a tax? Subhanallah. Look at this verse. Chapter 18, verse 80 to 81. Now, again, this is in the context of that person that traditionally known as Khidr, who was with Moses alayhi salam. And it's talking about where Khidr took the life of the boy. And here it's saying, as for the boy whose life was taken, his parents were believers and feared that he would be an overburden to them by transgression and disbelief. So we intended that their Lord should substitute for them someone better in purity, zakatan, and nearer to mercy. Look at that. Allah is going to replace that boy with someone with zakatan. Just like how Allah gave to Yahya alayhi salam zakat. Isn't that fascinating, brothers and sisters? Have a look at this verse. chapter 20, verse 75 to 76. But whoever comes to him as a believer, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and does righteous deeds, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. You find this throughout the Qur'an, so many verses like this. For those will be highest degrees in position, gardens of perpetual residence, beneath which rivers flow, wherein they will abide eternally. And that is the reward of the one who purifies himself. Tazakka. Look at that, brothers and sisters. So, believing in Allah and doing righteous deeds, just like giving from your wealth, is a means of attaining purity, purification. But where does the purification come from, brothers and sisters? I quoted the verses earlier. Zakat comes from Allah, brothers and sisters. Make no mistake about it. Through your good deeds and your action, you get purified, which comes from Allah. Look at this verse. Chapter 79, verse 17 to 19. Go to Pharaoh. Allah is commanding Musa, go to Pharaoh. Indeed, he is transgressed. And say to him, would you not purify yourself? Look at that. Tazakka. Will you not purify yourself? And let me guide you so that your Lord would guide you to your Lord. So would you fear him? Now, brothers and sisters, was Musa calling Pharaoh to give a 2.5% payment? Brothers and sisters, do you see how we've been fooled to make us believe that zakat is some tax we have to pay? Zakat comes from Allah, brothers and sisters. It comes from Allah alone. Look at this verse. Oh yes, just coming back to that word, atayna. He gave atayna, okay? That word, the root comes from alif ta ya, which means give, grant, to come, to bring, to come to pass, come upon, do, commit, arrive, pursue, put forth, show, increase, produce, pay, reach, happen, overtake, draw near, go, hit, meet, join, be engaged or occupied, perpetrate, undertake. Now, the words of underline that are really fascinating. To give or grant, or come upon, or to arrive at, or to reach something. Now think about it. Does it, by us doing righteous good deeds, isn't that a means for us to reach and arrive and reach purification? Think about that, brothers. Now let's move on. Now, chapter 23, verse 1 to 4. Certainly will the believers have succeeded, those who are during their salat humbly intent, and they who turn away from ill speech, and they who are, look at this, observant of zakah. The word there is lizzakati fa'ilun. The word fa'ilun actually appears in another verse in the Quran, which means something similar, to be a doer of something or to observe something. Now, does it say to pay? It doesn't. It says observers of zakat. How do you observe it? By doing righteous deeds, brothers and sisters. You observe and you attain this zakat from Allah. Here's another verse, chapter 30, verse 39. And whatever you give, ataytum, for interest, for riba, to have increase within the wealth of the people. Now it mentions wealth here. This is a means of giving, right, from your wealth. Will not increase with Allah. But what you give, ataytum, give or give, right, mean zakating, desiring the face of Allah. Those are the multipliers. Now, within the context of this verse, now it's implying that you give something of your wealth. So giving of your wealth is a means, right? It's a means of approach of attaining zakat. And remember, zakat comes from Allah, brothers and sisters. Now, here's another verse, chapter 92, verse 18. He who gives, yutti. Remember that same word, to give or reach or to arrive at, right? Those who gives from his wealth, malahu. It says wealth there. You give of your wealth to purify himself, to purify yourself. Yatazakka. You purify yourself by giving. So giving is a means of attaining zakat, purification. But ultimately the purification comes from Allah, brothers and sisters. Okay, now just recapping atu zakat, which is used throughout the Quran. Atu or yuttu means to give, grant, bring, do, commit. Remember that thing, the doers or observers of zakat? You do the zakat. It's not just giving, right? Arrive, pursue, reach, come upon, or draw near. Okay? Now, the word zakat in of itself means increase, growth, purify, prosper, thrive, flourish, goodness, righteousness. Okay? So therefore, the giving of zakat, yes, believing, remember the verse I quoted earlier, those who believe in Allah and do righteous good deeds, they purify themselves. And here in these verses, those who give from their wealth, that is a means of attaining purification. But the purification comes from Allah. Doesn't the Qur'an say, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ? It comes from Allah alone. Moving on. Have a look at this, brothers and sisters. Look at the deception of the translators. I just want to throw this out there. This is the Sahih International Translation, and this is the Muhsin Khan translation. Look what they say. In the translation, it says zakah, but guess what? In the Arabic text, which is there in the red, it says as-sadaqatu. It doesn't say zakat. He says zakat. It says sadaqah are only for the poor and for the needy and for those who are employed for it and for bringing hearts together and for the freedom of the captives and for those in debt and for the cause of Allah and for the traveler. Look at this. An obligation, faridatun. That farid word comes from that fard word, which means obligation. This is fard. It's an obligation. It's a commandment from Allah. But what do traditional Muslims tell us? That tells us that zakah is a tax, which is fard we must pay. But sadaqah is just voluntary. You don't have to do it. It's just voluntary if you do so. But the verse says it's fard, brothers and sisters. Look at that, brothers and sisters. And it's the same thing here, similar in Muhsin Khan translation. Sadaqah, it says here it means zakat. Does it say zakat in the text? No, it doesn't. Sadaqah, spending of your wealth, is fard, brothers and sisters. It's an obligation upon us. And zakat is purification, which comes to us through our actions, and ultimately it comes from Allah. Subhanallah. Now, brothers and sisters, salat, the word salat, and when it's used together with zakat. Remember the example I gave earlier? There's that famous saying, there's that expression, reap the fruits of your labor. Now think about this, brothers and sisters. Now look, think about this from a gardening or an agricultural perspective. Now, if you've got a garden, how do you maintain and manage your garden? You know, you do things like you'd bring new soil, or you'll fertilize the soil, you'll dig it up, you plant the seeds, you cover it up, you water the garden consistently, and then you have a problem of bugs and insects, and you have the problems with weeds, you've got to dig out the weeds. So there's this maintenance, right? There's this continuous working to maintain your garden. And in doing so, you produce the fruits. Think about salah and zakah in the same way. Think about it. Okay, look, I'm going to quote a verse here. Chapter 2, verse 40 to 46. Now, this is the first time in chronological order where the word salat is mentioned together with zakat. But are we to understand them separately or independently? Or do we understand them as complementing and explaining and completing one another? Look at this. O children of Israel, remember my favor which I've bestowed upon you and fulfill my covenant upon you, that I will fulfill your covenant, and be afraid of me, and believe in what I have sent down. Now, I've highlighted that word there, sent down. Keep that in mind. Confirming that which is already with you. And be not the first to disbelieve in it, and do not exchange my verses, bi'ayati, for a small price. And fear me, and do not mix the truth with falsehood, and conceal the truth while you know. And establish salah and give zakah. Right, the first time that those two words appear hand in hand. And bow with those who bow. Do you order righteousness of the people and forget yourself while you recite the scripture? Tatlun al-kitab. What is this in the context of? The context of the verses of Allah, brothers and sisters. Then will you not reason and seek help through patience and salat? And indeed, it is difficult except for the humbly submissive, who are certain that they will meet their Lord and that they will return to Him. Now, this passage here, Aqimus Salah wa Atu Zakah, it's within the context of the verses of Allah, right? It talks about what Allah sent down, anzala. It's talking about the verses of Allah, that you should not exchange His verses. And it also talks about reciting. So this Aqimus Salah it's all about the verses of Allah, brothers and sisters. But think about this. Is the verse saying recite and convey and teach and hold fast to the verses of Allah and pay a 2.5% tax? Or think about this. Remember the example, reap the fruits of what you from your labor. The labor, your labor is salat, brothers and sisters. It's you maintaining and establishing and restoring Salat, the verses of Allah, right? And in doing so, if you do this consistently, you do this persistently, and you persevere and you are sincere in this, only then do we attain zakah from Allah. Look at that, brothers and sisters. Doesn't that make sense? Because didn't Allah say that Allah gave Yahya zakatan? Look at that. Didn't Musa go to Pharaoh and say, would you not tazakka yourself, purify yourself? Think about this, brothers and sisters. You reap the fruit by your labor. SubhanAllah. Think about, I'll give you another analogy. Think about a marriage relationship. What keeps a marriage together, brothers and sisters? You would say things like communication, connection, attachment, to stay close. Remember those key words of salah? Similarly, marriage is similar, isn't it? By maintaining and establishing and restoring your marriage, only then does your marriage prosper. Remember the words of zakah? Only then does your marriage prosper. It flourishes, it attains goodness, it attains righteousness, it grows and increases. Look at that, brothers and sisters. Salah, when it's used together with zakah, is not two separate concepts, but rather they explain and they elaborate and they complement one another. SubhanAllah. Here's another verse. Chapter 5, verse 20. And Allah had already taken a covenant, mentions the same covenant like the verse I just quoted earlier, with the children of Israel, and delegated from among them 12 leaders. Allah said to them, I am with you if you establish salah and give zakah and believe in my messengers and support them. Pause there for a moment. What did the messengers bring, brothers and sisters? Didn't they deliver and convey and recite the verses of Allah? See, aqimu salah wa atu zakah is within that context of the verses of Allah. But by establishing and maintaining and restoring and performing salah consistently and persistently and doing it sincerely, only then do we attain zakat from Allah. Because Allah tells us zakat comes from Him. SubhanAllah. Now, there are at least 20 plus verses that make mention of salah and zakat together. Brothers and sisters, I didn't want to make the video too long. Now, I've mentioned this, I've listed them here, right? And I've mentioned here the context in which these verses appear, where the words aqimu salah wa atu zakat appear. Now, chapter 2, verse 83, for example, it mentions the children of Israel again and the covenant. Chapter 2, verse 110 mentions the people of the book. It mentions the Jews and the Christians. Chapter 2, verse 177 is in the context of righteousness. Chapter 2, verse 77 is in the context of usury. Chapter 4, verse 77 is in the context of warfare. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm still doing my research. I'm still doing my homework. But these verses, it mentions aqimu salah wa atu zakah within this context. It's really fascinating. I'm still doing my homework about it. But so far, that's what I've concluded, brothers and sisters. Continued. There's some more verses here. Feel free to pause the video and look at these in your own time, inshallah. People of the book and the mushrikeen. Conclusion. Now, conclusion. The word aqimu or aqime, let's recap this again, okay? Which means to rise or stand up, establish, make straight or right, maintain, erect, perform, set up, restore. Okay? Salat, abstract noun, which means connect, attach, contact, make close, following closely, union. Okay? But when they're coupled together, it means reciting, delivering, conveying, teaching, and holding fast, and following the ayat of Allah. Now think about it. Isa alayhi salam did this, Yahya alayhi salam did this, Musa alayhi salam did this, Ibrahim alayhi salam, they all did salat and they all did zakat. Surely Ibrahim alayhi salam, did he do salat while reciting Allahumma salli ala Muhammad? Did he do that, brothers and sisters? No, he didn't. He recited and conveyed what Allah revealed to the people. And that was their salat, brothers and sisters. And in doing so, they received this zakat from Allah. Okay? Aqimu salah wa atu zakah, reciting, delivering, conveying, teaching, holding fast the verses of Allah. And if you do this persistently, remember the verses say, do it at the two ends of the day and in the parts of the night, and at the declining of the sun until the darkness of the night, and do this with patience, do this while giving of your wealth. Remember the word salah is used in conjunction with so many different things throughout the Qur'an. If you do all of this consistently, persistently, and you persevere, only then, brothers and sisters, would we be given, granted, would be committed to, would arrive at, would reach, would pursue, would come upon, would draw near to purification, zakat, increase, growth, purified, prospered, flourish, thrive, goodness, righteousness, etc. Remember the example I gave about the garden and marriage? Only by maintaining and establishing your garden do you reap the fruits, right? Only by maintaining, keeping close to your spouse, working on your relationship and being consistent and persistent with it. Only then does your marriage flourish. Only then does your marriage prosper. Only then does your marriage thrive. The same thing with Salat and Zakat. They are connected, brothers and sisters. We are not to understand them separately. Now, another example I could give is in English, there's a term called hendiadys. Hendiadys is the expression of a single idea which is connected by two words, which is separated by the word and. For example, I could say something like, it was warm and sunny, right? Or I could say something like, it was cold and wet. Or I could say something like, my presentations are long and boring, right? Now, this is a hendiadys. Now, think about the Obey Allah and His Messenger verses, right? And I mentioned this in my Obey Allah and His Messenger video. There's so many verses like this. Those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger, those who emigrate to Allah and His Messenger, those who lie to Allah and His Messenger, those who help Allah and His Messenger. But are these two separate ideas, two separate concepts, or is it one and the same idea? Think about it. Think about Salah and Zakat in the same way. By being consistent and persistent in your Salah, which means reciting and conveying the verses of Allah, doing this continually and consistently, only then do we attain this zakat. Just like how Allah Azza wa Jal gave zakat to Yahya alayhi salam. Think about it, brothers and sisters. Now, how do I tie these two together? Subhanallah. With this beautiful verse here I quoted earlier. Chapter 2, verse 129. Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam, they make a supplication to Allah. O Lord, send among them a messenger from themselves who will recite, tatlu, reciting, remember? Your verses, ayatika, your verses, and teach them the book, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, the book, teaching them the verses and the book. And it says here, and wisdom, وَالْحِكْمَةِ. But brothers and sisters, is it Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, was he the one who gave them hikmah, or did the hikmah come from Allah? And I made a presentation on that as well. Doesn't the Qur'an say, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ? The hikmah comes from Allah. And I explained in that video, he mentions the ulul albab. The ulul albab, and I quoted the verses, they are those who constantly, continuously engage with the verses of Allah. It is those people who gain hikmah from Allah. Subhanallah, look at that. It says, and purify them. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. But remember the verses I quoted earlier? Where does this purification come from, brothers and sisters? Doesn't the Quran say, بَلِ اللَّهُ يُزَكِّي مَنْ يَشَاءُ? And doesn't it say, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَنْ يَشَاءُ? The wisdom and the purification comes from Allah, brothers and sisters. How do we attain this purity? Through the verses of Allah. No, there's no other way, brothers and sisters. So by reciting, delivering, conveying, teaching, holding fast to, and following the ayat of Allah, then we get purified from Allah. It's no coincidence that Allah used these two terms together. Okay? They complement and complete and explain each other, brothers and sisters. Now, here's another proof. Chapter 35, verse 18. And no bearer of burdens will bear the burden of another. And if a heavenly laden soul caused another to carry some of its load, nothing will be carried, even if he should be a close relative. You can only warn those who fear your Lord unseen and establish salah, وَأَقِيمُوا salah. Look what it says now. And whoever purifies himself, look, tazakka, the same zakat word, tazakka, himself, only purifies himself for his own soul, and to Allah is a final destination. Do you see how salah is also mentioned together with zakat? By establishing the salah correctly, consistently and persistently, and you persevere, only then does Allah purify you, brothers and sisters. Here's one more verse for you, just more proof. I forgot to put the quote, the reference there, my apologies. He has certainly succeeded who purifies himself, tazakka, and mentions the name of his Lord, and it says praise you. For Salah comes from that root, salat, which means connect, connection, contact, union, closeness. See how zakat is used together with salat? SubhanAllah, brothers and sisters. Do you see the relationship, see the connection between the two? Allah Azza wa Jalla makes his verses clear. We are just doing bayyinah of his verses. That's all, brothers and sisters. Okay, finally, I don't want to bore you too much, brothers and sisters. Conclusion, by establishing and maintaining, remember the aqimu word? Establish, maintain, set up, perform, restore, make something straight or correct. Your connection or your attachment or your closeness, salat, to the book of Allah. To the book of Allah. Only then will you be granted or you would reach. Remember the word atu means to give, grant, reach, approach, draw near. Only then will you be granted or reach purification or growth. Zakat from Allah. Make no mistake about it, brothers and sisters. By properly establishing your salah, being persistent and consistent and striving in the path of Allah with the book of Allah, only then do you get purified from Allah. Subhanallah. Brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Look, I'm happy for you to sort of respond to your comments. I'm looking forward to your comments. Again, just recapping what I do regarding my salah. I've taken the traditional salah and I've re-evaluated it and I've reconstructed it to the best of my ability to make it match the verses of Allah. But brothers and sisters, remember this. Please be patient. Brothers and sisters, be patient. Salah and zakat, this is a continuous self-improving process. This is not something you learn overnight, brothers and sisters. This is a lifelong journey. I always say the Qur'an is a lifelong journey, brothers and sisters. Let's be patient and learn together. And may Allah grant us the understanding and the wisdom and the knowledge to follow his book, inshallah. Okay, until next time, take care, brothers. Assalamu alaikum.